Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Ruthless Aggression Era podcast. As always, I am your host, Mel Matt, and along with me tonight is.
Hey Matt, how are you, buddy? It is Biff Kensington of Cage Side Seats, the Connoisseurs of Wrestling, and a couple of different hospitals of late. How are you doing, bud?
I'm doing good now. The past couple of days have been a bit rough because I've been sick. I've been under the weather. I actually had to miss Violent Wrestling Podcast Wednesday because of that. So yeah, it definitely sucks, but I am getting better. I'm not at 100% myself, but I am getting back to full strength. How
You
about
know, I
you?
think I think we deserve a little bit of kudos because we've both been dealing with problems, medical issues this week, and yet we are persevering. We are demonstrating the ruthless aggression that our society so often lacks.
Yeah, but honestly, I don't think this show really helped our cases very much.
I disagree. I say that our man cards are getting an extra hole punched by plugging away at this, especially for the show we have lined up tonight. So,
Yeah, so the show we have lined up tonight here is No Mercy 2003. And what was your experience with them, the show? Was this for the podcast the first time you had ever seen it?
yeah, this was a very weird point in my fandom. I had started to kind of fall out of watching every week. Back at this point, I had been a pretty religious viewer from '96 to 2002. And then into 2003, I kind of shifted away from watching every week. This was my senior year in high school, so I was kind of going all over the place. But I don't remember watching this show as it happened. I was aware of the show. I was still watching the weekly shows from time to time. But I don't think I'd ever seen this show until we were doing the prep work for this podcast. So this was kind of a blast for the past for me, a little time machine slice of wrestling that I didn't see when it originally aired back in 15 years ago. So
Yeah, it's actually kind of the same with me. Today was actually the first time I actually watched the entire pay per view as a whole. The only thing that I had seen from this show prior to the day was the Vince Stephanie match. Other than that, this was all pretty much new to me because I mainly watched the Raw TV and Raw pay per views because unfortunately I wasn't able to catch SmackDown where I was at growing up on UPN. I never got a chance to really catch that channel, so I was always kind of out of the loop when it came to SmackDown.
yeah, this was like really that weird period where SmackDown kind of started falling back in importance. Like at least into November of 2002 and December, you had the SmackDown 6 that had kind of elevated SmackDown, and both shows were kind of treated as equals. But then SmackDown kind of started falling into the B show role during this period. And so I was kind of like you. I had UPN, but I was really just kind of sticking with Raw during this stretch. So it's kind of new territory for both of us, really.
Yeah, like and SmackDown at the moment it's still going fine, but it's going to get a lot worse after this. It's going to get so much worse when you consider who becomes champion in mid 2004.
Yeah, that. Excuse me, I had to had to fix my microphone there. Yeah, it can always get worse. I learned that lesson the hard way. I would always think that wrestling had bottomed out, and I was like, it can't get no worse than this. And Vince McMahon loves to prove me wrong, so you just kind of roll with the flow and just hope for the best. And that's what we had to do during this period. This was not the most fun time to be a wrestling fan. If you were watching during this period, especially if you've been watching during the Attitude Era and the early Ruthless Aggression Era, I mean, just the change from 2002 to 2003 on SmackDown was pretty drastic, even though you had a lot of the same talent there. It's really kind of crazy.
Yeah. So No Mercy 2003. This took place on October 19th, 2003. took place in Baltimore, Maryland at the First Mariner Arena, and it was sponsored by Subway.
And this was actually, if I'm not mistaken, this was one of the weaker shows that they did in 2003. I was reading online, they actually undersold the event. They had to reconfigure the arena. The arena itself in Baltimore is a lot bigger, but they actually only sold like 8,500 tickets, I think it was. So it was kind of a down period for them on pay-per-view. Having said that, Subway actually sounds very awesome right now. So.
Yeah, same here.
Subway, if you're out there listening, sponsorship opportunity for the Ruthless Aggression Era podcast. You know you want to. So.
Yeah, man. And this was also the second SmackDown exclusive pay-per-view. The first one was Vengeance back in July. And that was a pretty good show. So hopefully Lightning will strike twice for No Mercy.
I am not a betting man, but I don't like the odds. Just looking at the card, I don't like the odds. But we can hope, right?
Yeah, we can hope. We can hope. We can go and talk about the theme song and the set design. Theme song "Today Is the Day" by Dope, and one of those songs that did not get dubbed over on the network in its original form on the network.
It's kind of cool, actually. It's hard to explain if you weren't watching at the time, but if you go back on the network and check it out, you can tell the influence that has been building over the years. I mean, you can see it and you recognize, yeah, this is a WWE show, because WWE has had a pretty consistent aesthetic for years now. But the one thing that I always notice about these shows, and I guess it's because of all the fireworks they use, but these shows, especially the SmackDown shows, they always feel so smoky. It's like the arena is just smoke covered for half the show because the smoke from the fireworks is just lingering. But it just creates this weird ambiance, for the show. But the theme song is not dubbed over, which is a plus, and the set. It's not the same set that we have all the time now. It's actually a unique set. And so, yes, those pay-per-views used to have their own set designs. It was a glorious time.
Yeah, today is the day. It's okay. It's probably one of Dope's better songs, but this was during a time where I don't know. For me, Dope was just kind of hit or miss. Like every once in a while, they have a good song. I think they're a much better band now.
I would give you that. I'd agree. But I mean, it's just all a matter of preference. I've heard some really crappy theme songs in my time. I wouldn't say that this is the best ever, but it's not the worst. Yeah. It's just much like this pay-per-view, it's just kind of there.
Right.
That's like a recurring theme with this show. It just exists.
So. Just you wait until the next pay-per-view's theme song.
Yeah. So, but they do get good in 2004, though. There are some very excellent theme songs in 2004. So when you get to your 2004 shows, you're going to have a nice little run. So.
Yeah, I do remember them having some pretty good round and pool. Who else? They used Rush for SummerSlam.
Yes, and my favorite of all time, Survivor Series 04, they used Ugly by the Xyz. That was choice. It's one of the best theme songs they've ever done. So, but yeah, this show is just there. It's just there.
Yeah, and speaking of just there, the set design, it's fine. It's not the best they've ever done. Like I like Unforgiven a lot better. I like SummerSlam a lot better. I would even probably go so far as to say I would say maybe better than Vengeance. I think it's a bit more unique than Vengeance, but it's a decent enough set design. Like it's not as generic as something like Bad Blood or Royal Rumble or something like that. But at the same time, it's still unique enough, I think.
Yeah, it's one of those deals where perspective changes over the years. At the time, and especially with you and having been going back through these shows, you're getting the experience of the different sets on each show. And so if you're doing like a marathon of 2003 2004 shows, it's not the most extravagant of sets. But if you are just kind of picking and choosing shows at random and you're watching the product today, you look back and you're like, wow, they have a different set. It's like, we have different standards now because wrestling shows used to have the unique sets, whereas today, unless you're WrestleMania, you really don't have anything unique. And so it's one of those perspective deals where your viewpoint kind of changes depending on what time period you're from and what you've been watching.
And so we end up starting the show with Rey Mysterio versus Tajiri for the Cruiserweight Championship.
This was probably the second best match on the show for me. I really enjoyed this match because I liked both guys that were in the match. It was good action. I mean, Cruiserweight title, it's always been one of those opening card acts in WWE, but Tajiri, very underrated talent. Rey Mysterio, obviously one of the greatest high flyers of all time. I thought this was a good match.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was a solid match. Like the storyline here, it is kind of weird because Tajiri and Mysterio faced off for the Cruiserweight title a few weeks back on SmackDown, and where Mysterio won. And after the match, Tajiri turns heel. For what reason? Your guess is as good as mine. Like they never explain exactly why he turns heel. He just does it just because.
WWE gonna WWE basically. So
pretty much. I mean, like the real reason is that they needed a top heel in the Cruiserweight division. But in storyline, there's no reason why he does it. He just does it just to do it.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they just lack the confidence in the rest of their roster at the time. I don't know. Tajiri had been a heel, or at least somewhat of a heel in ECW, so maybe they were trying to draw on that a little bit. But when you go back and you look at Tajiri's run in WWF and WWE, it just really felt awkward. I think is the best word to describe it. So if you take the match and just put it in a vacuum, it's decent. It's not the greatest match you're ever going to see. Both guys had far better matches, but it's fine in a vacuum. But like you said, the story behind the turn, it just I don't know. The cruiserweight division and during this period, it just really didn't work. I never really felt like it was anything special. And, Rey Mysterio would go on to better things, obviously, when he got out of the division and started wrestling the main eventers again. So it is what it is.
Right, and Tajiri did end up winning the Cruiserweight title about a week or so after he turned heel. Sprays red mist in Mysterio's eyes and wins the championship. And I will say this, I thought that match was way better than this one. Like you said, it's not the best match ever. It's not the worst match either. I don't know. It felt like they were holding back here, I thought.
If there was one criticism I could have of the match, it's almost like there was a styles clash. Like they were wrestling two distinct styles that didn't mesh well together. And maybe that was part of it. I know that Rey was dealing with some knee injuries during the early part of his career in WWE, so maybe there was some injuries that caused it to be a little bit clunky. I mean, like it's not that it was a bad match. It just wasn't up to the standard that both guys could perform at. You see Tajiri and Rey Mysterio on paper, and you think, "Wow, that's a 4-star match," and it almost felt like a good TV match. For pay-per-view, it might not be the greatest in the world, but it was fine. It's like I said at the start of the show. This show, it just kind of exists. It's not that it's bad. It's just kind of there. So.
Right. Yeah, like Mysterio works over Tajiri's knees, which I do like. You know, targeting the knees that he uses for the buzzsaw kicks and all of that. And Mysterio just hits a killer tornado DDT from the top rope.
Yeah, he was really, I would say, during this period, I couldn't think of maybe a handful of guys in the company that were as exciting inside the ring as Rey Mysterio. And it just goes to show you that, Rey had the capacity to work with the cruiserweights. He could work matches with Tajiri or Jamie Noble. Whenever they would bring in Chavo after Los Guerreros kind of broke up, he could work with the cruiserweights, but he had so much more to give. When he would wrestle guys like the Undertaker, he just kind of have these great matches out of nowhere. So it's always fun watching Ray do his thing. It's just kind of reminds you when you tend to forget about him how good he really was inside the ring.
Yeah, and the finish of the match comes when two fans end up trying to enter the ring, and Tajiri ends up hitting a buzzsaw kick on Mysterio for the win. And do you know who those two guys would end up being?
I do not. At first, I thought that it was actually wait a minute. Wasn't one of them Jimmy Wang Yang?
Yes, one of them was Jimmy Wang Yang. What are you going with Jimmy Wang Yang?
There we go. Yeah, I'm not sure the other guy, but one of them was like Jimmy Wang Yang, I thought. But yeah, I thought they were actual fans at first, and then I realized that it was a little bit too convenient, so I figured they would show back up at some point.
Yeah, those two were Sakoto, and they would end up going on to become Tajiri's bodyguards during this time. They were sort of doing this Yakuza gimmick.
That just shows you how little I remember from this era. I had no memory of that whatsoever until you mentioned it. I had completely forgotten it.
Yeah, and I really like this run of Tajiri's, when he was the heel with Akio and Sakoto. I really enjoyed this little run of Tajiri's here. Even though his initial heel turn really did not make a lick of sense whatsoever, I did like this run that he had with as his bodyguards.
He had the tenacity to pull it off. He had kind of that ferociousness. He's a hard hitting wrestler, so they always tend to make good heels because that they can just beat the tar out of you, and it makes it realistic and believable. And then with the bodyguards, it's always a fun gimmick. So.
Yep. So backstage, Vince McMahon makes a stipulation for his match, says that if anyone interferes in the match, they will be permanently fired.
With TNA/Impact Wrestling announcer Josh Matthews, no less. So.
I was trying to avoid saying his name. I do not want to acknowledge him at all.
Well, if we only mention it once, he won't appear like Beetlejuice. So, but yeah, that was Vince. I will always give Vince credit where credit is due. He can cut a good promo. It gets you interested. But when we get to the match, and like you said, you had actually seen Stephanie and Vince the match before. When we get to that match, I'm sure that we're going to have plenty to say about the McMahon family drama, which is kind of the centerpiece of the show. So in the moments, promo's good, but I cannot express adequately how tiresome the feud was between Vince and Stephanie during this period. I was not a fan of it. I'm still a fan of it today, and I certainly wasn't a fan of it then. But it was a good promo. I mean, Vince can cut a good promo when he wants to. I just wish he had better material to work with here.
Right. And so the next match, A-Train taking on Chris Benoit.
Whew. I I'm going to let you give your thoughts first because I have it's I have really weird thoughts on this match. I'm going to let you give your thoughts first, though.
Okay. So the storyline of this match was that A Train was obsessed with saying that he could beat Chris Benoit because Chris Benoit had beaten him in a match. Like I think it was like a Cripper crossface, but A Train's feet were under the ropes, so he was saying that Benoit just couldn't beat him fair. So that whole thing was going on. And honestly, I actually really like this match. I would probably go so far as to say maybe my favorite match on the card, to be honest. I really enjoyed this match. A-Train has some good psychology, even though there is a very nasty botch later on in the match, like insane botch.
Yeah.
A-Train has like Benoit up on his shoulders. There's a steel chair in the ring. A-Train drops Chris Benoit right on his head onto the chair. It is one of the worst botches I think I've seen on the podcast so far. And you can even hear A-Train, you know, he's still trying to be in character, but you can clearly hear him say, "You are right."
Yeah. Yeah, and this is the thing that made me uncomfortable about the match because I knew this botch. I've seen this botch before. It used to be on compilations back in the day of like the worst botches in wrestling because, like you said, it's just so bad. I feel terrible for saying this, but hindsight being 2020, I almost wish that this botch had like paralyzed Chris Benoit or injured him severely, and it just would have ended everything right there. So we didn't have to go through what we went through in 2007. That was my honest reaction when I saw this botch again. I was like, as terrible as it is to say, you know, wishing injury on someone, knowing what Chris Benoit would go on to do and what, you know, what wound up happening in the end of his life, it just makes you wonder, you know, if this botch, because it looked like he broke his freaking neck. He dropped him on the top of his damn head. So you know that he was just an eyelash away from catastrophe. It just makes you wonder, you know, if he had broken his neck and been paralyzed like Darren Drozdov, how different wrestling world would be. You know, and it's just so weird to think, you know, such weird terms like that. But, you know, history took its own course and obviously things worked out the way they did. I will say this on a much lighter note. It's really interesting the dichotomy in 2018 when you mentioned Chris Benoit and A-Train. Back in 2003, especially among online fans, Chris Benoit was like a god.
Right.
And A-Train was just a big fat nobody. And now in 2018, Chris Benoit is, you know, Lord Voldemort. You know, you don't talk about Benoit for obvious reasons. And A-Train, you know, has become a very respected member of the NXT training staff. He's got a lot of cred from his time in Japan and his work in NXT. So it's just weird how roles reverse in wrestling sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, he's the main trainer in the Performance Center now, which is kind of bizarre. Like, if you had told me in like 2003 that like freaking A-Train was going to be training, you know, the top NXT stars, like the top development, like the future stars of the, I would have laughed in your face. Like, really, the fat hairy dude with a train sound at the beginning of his theme song. There was no way that's going to happen.
If you had told me that back in 2003 during this match, I would have said, wait a minute, you mean Chris Benoit is not the trainer? You would think Chris Benoit is the guy that would be training in 2018, not A-Train. If you told me A-Train is the head of developmental in 2018, I would have thought, wow, wrestling must really suck. And, you know, that's depending on who you talk to. The main roster kind of does, but what he's responsible for is one of the best promotions in the world. So it just goes to show you. I mean, you don't know what you don't know, and he became a really popular star in Japan, and he's done an excellent job in NXT. So it's fun to go back and watch him when he was wrestling before he had the respect of the fans.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing with A Train. For me, A Train, he was always like, especially during this time, watching a lot of his matches on SmackDown, you can tell that he is a guy who, if he just had just a little bit more season, just a little bit more experience, he probably could have been a top heel. I really think that he could have been a top heel. He just didn't have the experience just yet. And I think him going to Japan and getting all that experience and coming back, even though his WWE comeback didn't exactly work out in a way. I mean, I guess it kind of did in the long run, him being the trainer at NXT, but in terms of an on-screen performer in WWE, it didn't quite work out. But I think him going to Japan and getting all that experience, I think it really did work out for him because now he is a respected guy. But I just think, man, in 2003, because he is doing the solid work. You can tell that he does have the basic fundamentals down, but you just think, man, if he just had just a little bit more seasoning, he could probably be somebody.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too, and I think also it kind of goes hand in hand. Like he needed a little bit of extra seasoning because he came up, and if I'm not mistaken, he made his debut either in very, very late '98 or 1999. He was definitely an Attitude Era guy because he was with Draws for a little while, but the style was different too. I think it was just a different era. We're talking about an era when you had Chris Benoit, Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero, on SmackDown especially, just kind of mixing it up with that mix of Japanese wrestling and lucha libre and the technical wrestling, the kind of the Canadian, the Calgary school, the Japanese school, the Mexican school, they all just kind of combined into that style that, Edge and Benoit and Angle and Ray and all of these guys were using. And then here comes Albert, who's kind of a throwback. He's a power wrestler, and it just wasn't the right time for that kind of performer. If Albert had come along 15 years later, he would have been a much bigger star. To your point, with the seasoning that he got in Japan, he would have been a much bigger deal. It never worked out for him professionally. But it is really cool that he's been able to forge a career as the head of NXT. And, given his success in helping guys and when the women on the NXT roster really become stars, I mean, the sky's the limit for him. He's going to have that job for as long as he wants it, most likely. So I'm happy for him.
Yep. So backstage, Heidenreich chokes Shannon Moore. Says that Little Johnny has told him that Matt Hardy threw away his tryout tape.
Matt Hardy, the early years. Yeah, well, I guess it wouldn't be that early. I guess he's been around in the company for several years at this point, but it's weird going back looking at Matt Hardy and Shannon Moore and just thinking about where they would both end up long term. It's just kind of crazy. It's a mind trip, really.
Yeah, I mean, like this is sort of near the end of Matt Hardy's version 1 run. Like this whole pay-per-view, from what I remember, is sort of like the last hurrah for that version 1 gimmick.
Yeah, it's the last hurrah for the version 1 gimmick, and it's really kind of almost a cutoff for a lot of the storylines because you started seeing some of the changes that would carry the brand through 2004. Eddie Guerrero was really, going to start making his big run, after this show. He started kind of making that main event rush that would culminate early on in 2004 with the WWE Championship. Chris Benoit was starting to kind of become a bigger player. This was, John Cena was starting to make some noise during this point. So it really is kind of an interesting show from that perspective where you see, they're kind of putting the different pieces in place that would carry them for the next couple of years.
Yeah, and it's also bizarre to see Heidenreich here because this was like a full year before he really made his debut. And I knew that he had appeared on Raw around this time, but I didn't know that he appeared on No Mercy as well.
It's just one of those deals where, like, I try to forget him as much as I can because it's just, he's one of those guys where you just kind of go, yeah, he was a thing that happened, and let's move on and not worry too much about it. But, I mean, it is what it is. So.
Yeah, like apparently little Johnny was supposed to be like a small doll that represented his inner child. He was still angry being born in a charity hospital. And he would bring out the doll with him at ringside of OVW. So like in the same way as like George Steele's Mine or Al Snow's Head. It was something like that. I mean, do you think that gimmick would have worked around this time, or do you think it would have kind of flatlined?
I don't think it would have worked, but I don't know that it would have been necessarily on the gimmick. Again, I think Heidenreich, it's kind of the same deal with Albert. I think it's just, wrestling the wrong style for that era to get over. It's.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not as talented as Albert either. So there's that strike working against him. I don't know that it would have been any better than what they wound up doing. Obviously, there was some horror show stuff he wound up doing with Michael Cole later on. But if you don't know what we're talking about, consider yourself thankful. That's all I'll say. You don't want to know. So
I mean, we'll get around to it when we take a look at Survivor Series 2004. That's a long way off.
I'll be on vacation that week, so I don't need to relive the horror.
Oh, I'm going to try and get you. I'm going to try and get you on that episode. No doubt about it.
I quit from podcasting before I relive that trauma. I need a trigger warning on it. So,
hey, Heidenreich and Undertaker. What's not to love?
A lot. Oh, Lord. It makes Zach Gowen and Matt Hardy that much more attractive to talk about. I'll tell you what.
And speaking of, that's the next match. Matt Hardy version 1 versus Zach Gowen. And we get a couple of Matt facts here. Matt Hardy has been in 5 car wrecks, and Matt is never grossed out.
I liked Matt Hardy version 1. I know it was running its course, but it was a fun mid-card deal. I mean, it was goofy fun, but I enjoyed it. I thought Matt Hardy had some of the best work of his career up until he kind of reinvented himself. It's always weird once he goes from version 1. It's like he's still in the company. He still has different moments. I know he was ECW champion at one point. It's like, but you almost forget about his work after version 1. It's like the rest of his career is just so low key compared to what he was in the original incarnation of the Hardy Boys, and then when he first broke away as Matt Hardy version 1. It's like that was kind of his peak. And even though he had championship success after and had some high-profile matches with his brother at times, it just never felt like he was that big of a deal ever again. So that's just my interpretation of it. I wasn't watching as religiously after this either, so that could be just my, faulty memory at work.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit. He does have a couple of bigger moments after this, mainly with Kane and Edge and all that stuff, and MVP. But he never really gets to like a super popular kind of level again until the broken Matt Hardy gimmick took off.
I do stand corrected. The stuff with Edge, I had forgotten that it had come after this. For some reason, I was thinking it was before, but you're right. The feud with Edge was definitely a big deal, and kind of I think that was in 2005 maybe.
Yeah, this was about 2005.
Yeah. Okay. So we're still a few years away from that. So yeah, he did have a couple of other runs during the next couple of years that were pretty big, but it was definitely his peak, before that, and then after that, he would really take him leaving the company to kind of find his way again. So.
Yep. So Zach Gallen versus Matt Hardy. It's a fine match. I mean, it is what it is. Shane Moore interferes a couple of times. Zach Gallen gets a few offense in. Gallen hits a springboard moonsault on Matt Hardy for the win.
It was a beautiful moonsault.
Yeah, I mean, it looked really good.
Yeah, it looked good. Zach Gallen, he's one of those performers where he's naturally going to get a lot of kudos, a lot of respect because of the disability that he faces. If you don't know Zach Gallen, he wrestled with one leg. He only had one leg. I think he had cancer. And they had to amputate his leg early on in life. So he's wrestling with one leg, basically. And so, when you look at what he was able to do in the ring, it was pretty damn impressive, I thought. But at the same time, it does take an adjustment because it is an unusual circumstance where you're watching somebody, wrestling on one leg, hopping around. It's a little bit jarring, but at the same time, you're like, the dude has a lot of heart and determination to go out there and do it. So I give him kudos. He didn't do much after this, though. I kind of feel like this was one of the last big shots that he had in WWE.
Yeah, it was. Like, this is like one of the last times we actually see Zach Gallen. He did appear on SmackDown the week after this, and then after that he was gone, mainly due to injuries, and he also had a bit of an attitude problem backstage. Apparently, he had developed a pretty big ego, which, I mean, one of the first storylines he was in was with Roddy Piper, Vince McMahon, and Hulk Hogan. Like, no duh, he's going to have a giant ego.
Yeah, he's just working with the biggest stars in wrestling history. So, yeah. But
he's doing pretty well now. He was on American Ninja Warrior, and he was also teaming with Gregory Iron on the Indies. So he's doing pretty well for himself now.
Yeah, I never had a problem with him. He just really wasn't around that long. I mean, the buzz around him coming in, I think, was bigger than what he wound up being. But, in 2003, he did have some pretty memorable stuff. I mean, I think everybody probably remembers the beating that Brock Lesnar gave him. Looked like he damn near killed him. It got Brock over like a monster. So, he had some fun moments. He just wasn't around that long. And it's a shame, because he did have some talent, especially given his limitation in the ring. He was a pretty talented performer. It would have been cool to see what he could have done if he'd gotten a bit of a longer run, but it might have been the attitude that just kind of cost him that shot. But it is, like you said, it's glad that he kind of found his way after, and he's had some success outside of the company. So good for him.
Yeah, I mean, this was a decent enough match. I mean, it was what it was.
Yeah.
Backstage, Vince McMahon's getting ready for his match. Linda McMahon walks in and begs Vince to reconsider the match. And Vince decides to make things fair by saying that Stephanie McMahon can beat him via pinfall or submission, and then makes it a no-holds-barred match. They just added on stipulations here. It feels very last minute.
Yeah, that's a WWE trademark during this period too. It feels like things just kind of get tacked on, like, oh, by the way, it's no holds barred, or oh, by the way, it's Hell in a Cell. It's just these steps come out of nowhere, and it's like, what? That's how they did it. It was a pretty common theme, really, from the Attitude Era on, that just kind of grates on you after a while. I also would like to point out that there's a future cabinet secretary, Linda McMahon. So,
yeah.
Imagine talking about that in 2003 and having your mind blown. Linda McMahon going to go to Washington for President Donald Trump. Like, the Apprentice guy? Like, yeah. halcyon days of 2003. Anyway, that's my political commentary for the show.
I mean, yeah, like it is weird that they are attacking on all these things for a match that arguably is pretty much like the biggest match going into this match, going to this card. Like you think for because this is like the biggest match on the card, more or less. This is one that they've been really building up for a long time now. So you think that there would be a bit more planned out, at least in the storyline, but I don't know. A lot of it does feel sort of last minute.
Yeah, it's. I mean, this like. I mean, I think you would agree. This is kind of the. Even though it's not the actual main event of the show, it's kind of the match the show is built around. So it essentially is the main event.
Yeah,
And
I'm surprised this didn't main event. Like, especially when you see the intro. Like, there's two video packages for that match and for Undertaker and Brock Lesnar. And watching those video packages back to back, you can tell which angle they were more invested in.
yeah, it's not at all unapparent what they're kind of focusing on. So the only thing that I could think of, and this is it's literally just taking a guess. They were worried that the match was going to suck, and so they decided last minute to try and kind of juice it up a little bit. But that begs the question, why the hell did they promote this match to begin with? It's like who in creative at this point looked at this and said, this is going to be an excellent match to build a show around. I mean, it's just it's insanity. I don't know what the hell they were thinking when they did this stupid storyline, but we'll get there. We have a tag match to get to first, thankfully. Although, given who's in the tag match, I'm not as thankful as I was 30 seconds ago. So.
Yeah, but coming up next is the APA versus the Basham Brothers, and the APA are back in business. They recently reopened the agency, the Acolyte Protection Agency. They even have a new butler now.
This is a weird period in the tag team division for SmackDown because the APA is in its last legs.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Bradshaw's got the hair already cropped up, so he's got the JBL look already going here. And then the Bashams, if you've ever listened to Jim Cornette talk about the Bashams, it's always funny, how much he hates creative for what they did to these poor guys. I can't remember off the top of my head which one was the OVW champion, though. Was it Danny Basham, I think, or Doug Basham, maybe?
I'm not sure.
One of them, yeah, like one of them was like Jim Cornette's top heel. I think it was.
I think it was Doug.
I think it was Doug. Yeah, I think it was Doug, and then they shaved his head and they gave him tag team partner, and like the Bashams are almost like a footnote. You never hardly think about them these days, but Shaniqua. She was, I'm trying to think of a PG way of putting this. She was very much not dressed all that much here. No. So that was kind of a thrill. Well, maybe thrill is not the right word. It was a scene. Let's put it that way. It was an interesting scene. I don't know what else to say about this match. The APA is not exactly my cup of tea when it comes to tag team wrestling. This match was just kind of there. I didn't have any strong opinions on it either way because I was too busy looking at the Basham's heads. So, but congratulations to the Bashams. So.
I mean, you said earlier that the APA is sort of on its last legs, and that is absolutely what it feels like. It feels like a retirement tour. That's what it feels like for them.
Yeah, I mean, when you consider who the APA broke in with, their part of the ministry. They coming into the tag ranks when the New Age Outlaws are on top. You have the Hardys that are kind of kicking around now. Then they'll have Edge and Christian. The Dudley Boys come in a little bit later in 99 and 2000. And they're one of the last teams left standing from that era. I mean, at this point, the Hardys have broken up. The Dudleys have split. You know, Bubba Ray is doing his thing over on Raw. More so in 2002.
In 2002, the Dudley Boys were back together by this point.
Yeah, they had broken up and gotten back. Yeah. But the Witch Outlaws, you know, they were done at this point. Billy had gone on with Chuck Palumbo in 2002. And so it was kind of like the last domino standing of that tag division, with the exception of the Dudleys. It was just kind of weird how they were kind of relics of a bygone era at that point. And but you know, at the same time, I don't know anybody watching in 2003, especially the online fans like I was a part of, had no idea of what was coming in 04. Nobody in a million years would have guessed JBL would have been WWE champion. That was lunacy. Nobody ever would have looked at JBL in 2003 and said, "Yeah, that guy's gonna, you know, be a WWE champion and co-main event WrestleMania." So it's pretty insane.
Yeah, so I mean, this match it's fine. Like it is what it is. I mean, it's a decent enough match. I will say this, probably more of a SmackDown match than a pay-per-view match. I don't know if this really needed to be a pay-per-view match, but I mean, it was fine. Like the finish of the match comes when Shaniqua, who was written off TV for about a month or so after taking the clothesline from Hell by Bradshaw, and is making a return and bashes Bradshaw of the club, and then the Basham Brothers get the win.
Yeah, this is, and you bring that up, and we're about to touch on this in the next match, especially. But this was back in the era when it was ruthless aggression 101, men just beating the crap out of the women. You talk about like a culture shock. You see, you know, men manhandling women, and you're like, holy crap, that would never fly in 2018. Like the standards have changed so much. It just makes you take a sit up and take notice, like, wow, it used to be way more violent. Not just in the spots in some of the matches and the chair shots to the head and everything. You know, poor Eddie Guerrero, I'm still not sure how he didn't get decapitated in the match with JBL in 2004. With that chair shot. It was the hardest chair shot I've ever seen, with maybe the possible exception of Ken Shamrock and The Rock. But it's like you see, you know, Shaniqua just get clothesline out of her boots, and you're like, this is uncomfortable because you're not used to this in 2018. It's like we've moved past this, and it's really jarring and weird how that happens. But that's what you notice when you watch these old shows. It was just a different era, a different style, a different product. It's just a different time.
Yeah, and the Bashams also have a post-match interview, and Shaniqua says that she's going to reward them. It's also worth knowing that the Basham brothers had an S&M gimmick. Just saying.
And on that note, we'll just fast forward right on through that. We don't need to go any further on that one. Like I said,
we might have to we might have to dedicate an entire episode to this gimmick.
I'll be on vacation, but you can have fun with that. So. You can do it when you do the Heidenreich episode. It ain't easy being cheesy, folks.
So the next match, probably the match that I'm shocked did not main event this match. Probably the match that many people will probably remember this pay-per-view for. It's Vince McMahon versus Stephanie McMahon in the first ever and hopefully last ever father-daughter I Quit match.
Well, we can definitely hope it's the last ever. Although, you know, if intergender wrestling comes back, you never know. Aurora and Triple H could have a WrestleMania match in 15 years or so. So we'll have to cross our fingers and hope that doesn't happen. This match sucked. This match sucked really bad.
I don't think we're going to mince words on here. This match did. It sucked. It's by far the worst match of the night, which isn't really saying much, but still, I mean, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's like Stephanie at this point did not have the same type of track record that Vince did in these kind of like garbage matches or the stipulation matches. You know, Vince at this point, he had the match with Triple H in '99 at Armageddon that was, really well received, and he had the fight with Shane at WrestleMania 17, and so Vince was kind of known as a guy that could have like the garbage balls, and even in 2003, the match with Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 19, it's like he has these matches where they're not technical masterpieces, but they're entertaining for what they are, and Stephanie had the good match with Trish in 2001. I think it was at No Way Out. That was way better than it had any right to be. Trish was not a very good wrestler at that point. Everybody was expecting a train wreck. It turned out to be a good match. And so maybe they were banking that they could have an entertaining match with each other. But, I mean, especially from a modern perspective, watching Vince beat up Stephanie, it's uncomfortable, one. Two, the match is just not good. And three, the storyline behind the match was just so bad. It was worn out storytelling back in 2000. People were tired of the McMahon family drama then. It ruined the invasion angle, and then they just restarted in 2002 and 2003. And it's like putting the scoop of ice cream on top of dog turds. You're still going to get a big mouthful of dog turds. You just don't want it. I know that's an appetizing image for people listening, but this sucked. It was dog shit. I'm sorry. That's all I can say.
Yeah, so the storyline, this was actually been building up for several months now. Really all the way back to when Stephanie McMahon ended up hiring Mr. America around April or May or so. So it's been building up for about 5 months or so. And so Vince McMahon was like, I'm not going to fire my daughter, but I'm going to make you quit. Stephanie McMahon, booked really, really strong here, saying that she was not going to quit. And so Vince McMahon, ends up making Undertaker versus Brock Lesnar for the title. And Vince says if she doesn't take back that match, he's going to end up making this match. Stephanie refused, so we got this match. And so, this is such a soap opera match. Like, it to the point where it is going to be given Al Wilson in 2003 a run for that money. Like, that's how soap opera the storyline is.
I like the Al Wilson storyline. I'm sorry, I gotta throw this in there.
No.
It was entertaining crap. It was crap, but it was entertaining crap. Because let me tell you why I enjoyed it. And everybody's gonna say, "Well, you enjoyed it because Dawn Marie and Tori Wilson made out in the hotel room," and you're exactly right.
I'm not surprised to hear that.
Well, I mean, hell, I'm sorry. I'm a guy, okay? Yeah, I'm a flexible guy, but I enjoyed it. It was nice. So, and Al Wilson, dying of the sex-induced heart attack. It was crap, but it was entertaining. It wasn't. I mean, it was never supposed to be. Now this is like a main event angle, like you're building a show around. That's not so good. The Al Wilson stuff was always kitsch. It was like low card stuff. It was just, window dressing. It was never the main angle that they built the entire brand around. Like Stephanie and Vince, like you said, they've been building for 5 months, and we didn't have Dawn Marie and Tori Wilson making out to save it. So,
but we didn't have
Vince and
Stable making out.
Well, that is true. I apologize for nothing. I'm taking the good with what I can get. So, um, but you know what I think really hurts this match in the end is that even with her face turn, Stephanie McMahon was just never that popular. She's just not she was she got cheers. They had the correct response. It's not like they rejected it. It's just Stephanie was never a super sympathetic character, and I think that more than anything else kind of drained this match. Because I didn't get the impression watching that the fans were all that enthused with what they were seeing. You know, she got a decent reaction, but it wasn't anything like, this is our champion. We're going to get behind her because she's protecting us from, the evil machinations of Vince. I never really got the over the top fan participation in this match.
Yeah, I mean, when you put it like that, I can see your point. Because Stephanie, she was popular, but I don't think she was ever like one of the top stars on SmackDown at this time.
Yeah, maybe the best way to compare it is to compare her to the authority figures that came before and after her. Like in 2000, when Mick Foley would come out, he gets monster ovations. In 2018, when a Kurt Angle or a Page come out, they get monster ovations. Stephanie wasn't really getting that. She was getting an ovation. I mean, she was the babyface here, the clear babyface, but like it was a main event angle, but it had mid card heat and mid card placement too. Now Vince gets a reaction, but Vince has always gotten a reaction. It's just, I don't know. It's like for the story they were trying to tell, I just don't think that it was ever going to really work because Stephanie McMahon, especially in that period, just was not as sympathetic a character as she may have been if they had done this like in 1999. It's like she's just been the evil character for so many years, and it never really made sense for her to be brought back to lead SmackDown anyway. And that was a huge blow against SmackDown for the first 4 or 5 months of the brand extension. I think it was a big reason why Raw kind of jumped out to a lead in the ratings during that stretch. So I don't know. I don't think that it was the right call. The storyline itself was very tiresome. The McMahon family drama had been more than played out. But thankfully, after this, Stephanie, she kind of goes away for a little while. This is really one of the last stretches where she's a consistent character for a couple of years. So at least it ended the nightmare for a little while, I guess. That's all I can say about it, really.
Yeah, she doesn't really become like an active character until maybe 2008 or so. So this is really like the last time, at least for a while, that she becomes an active character on TV.
Yeah, and to her credit, she had. I mean, she's had her moments where she kind of overpowers the roster at different points. She's done a lot better with Ronda Rousey. But she did improve as a character a lot when she came back. So you did see the improvement in her. She was really bad in 2000. I thought she was just ranked terrible, during that heel run with Triple H as the power. Oh, God, what do they used to call themselves? The McMahon Helmsley era or whatever. She wasn't very good, I didn't think. She got better in 2002, 2003, but she really became a more rounded character when the Authority came into existence. Just, a little bit of Stephanie goes a long way.
Yeah, and the match itself it's pretty bad. Like, it is uncomfortable to watch. And to their credit, I think that's what they're trying to go for, but I don't think it's quite working the way that they wanted to. Because I think the idea is that they want to create sympathy for Stephanie and they want to get heat on Vince. But I think it goes in the way it's like it's uncomfortable to the point where I don't want to see this,
Yeah, it's there's a fine line between this is making me uncomfortable. I want to see the hero get revenge, and this is making me uncomfortable. I don't want to watch.
Right.
And they were straddling the line and going over. And if memory serves, outside of Vince McMahon's interaction with the Undertaker in the months after this storyline never really had a real satisfying conclusion because Vince was off TV by the start of 2004 anyway. He really wasn't around all that much. So it's not like Vince would be getting his, big comeuppance from some new character. I mean, he had the interaction with the Undertaker, and that was pretty much it. So it almost rendered the storyline kind of meaningless because Stephanie never got her revenge. She just kind of disappeared for a couple of years. It just leaves a bad taste in your mouth all around. It doesn't really do anything. It doesn't solve anything. It just kind of put the punctuation mark on a story that didn't need to be told.
Yeah, and the match itself is just pretty bad. Like Vince just applies just this god awful half Boston crap. It just looks terrible.
Yeah, it's Vince does most of his acting with his pectoral muscles and his biceps here. So
he is looking jacked tonight.
Yeah, he was on the muscle and fitness diet for this one, so it's uncomfortable because if you're not a fan of intergender wrestling, it's uncomfortable to begin with, and I am not. I've gone on record multiple times saying I don't like intergender wrestling. I just never have. It never really struck me as something that I'd like to see. And two, I'm not a huge fan of Vince at this point in time. I'm not a huge fan of Stephanie, so I don't have any real emotional investment. And, to cap it off, the match itself is just, garbage, as Xavier Woods would say. You add all of that up, and it's just a real unsatisfying main event match in the middle of the show. So...
Yeah, I mean, the finish of the match comes where Vince ends up choking Stephanie with a lead pipe, and Linda ends up throwing in the towel for Stephanie, so Vince ends up winning the match. And after the match, Vince McMahon shoves down Linda McMahon.
Yep. I mean, this is... I can't remember, does Linda show back up at any point before Raw goes back to the USA Network? Because I can't remember if she shows back up any meaningful interaction with Vince after this or not.
I don't think she does. I don't think she does. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think she does.
I don't think she does either, which there again, she comes back and she turns heel, which, I mean, God knows that's what the wrestling world was waiting for, Linda McMahon to turn heel. But another little piece of the puzzle here that never really gets any resolution. So it's just a weird match. It's a weird story. It's a weird finish. It's a weird way to wrap everything up, and it's just unsatisfying on every level. It's not a good match. It's not a good story. It's not a good ending. It doesn't make you, feel good or anything. It doesn't excite you. It just makes you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'm completely agree. And I think that's my final thoughts on this match as well. It's just a bad match all around. It's bad. There's really nothing else to say about it.
It's a low point.
Pretty bad. Yeah, like a low point 2030.
Yeah.
So we get to move on to something a little bit better. Kurt Angle versus John Cena.
Oof. Talk about a match that would be a huge WrestleMania main event like less than 2 years later. I mean, it's so weird to go back and watch John Cena in the early years to think about what he would become. And seeing Kurt Angle at his peak. This is the Kurt Angle from 2001 to 2000 and I would say 5 that is like the all-time great professional wrestler. He's, fully immersed in that serious gimmick at this point. He's had his run with Brock Lesnar. This is Kurt Angle at his peak. He would never be any better than he was during this stretch. And he got a really good match out of John Cena. I thought this was my personal favorite match on the card. I thought this was the best match. It kind of beat out the opener for me. I thought it was, an exceptional match. Even despite Cena's limitations at this point. So.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a good match. I wouldn't say it was a great match, but it was a pretty good match for what it was.
Yeah, it's John Cena would become a lot better. With more experience. So I don't want to give the impression that you go back to watch this match thinking you're getting like 2007 John Cena, because you're not. John Cena is very much being carried by Kurt Angle here.
Oh yes, certainly.
Yeah, but if again, it's you said it best talking about the tag match. I think this match was a good match. It's not a great match. It feels like a good SmackDown main event. I'm not necessarily seeing it like pay-per-view quality, but there's really not much on this card that was pay-per-view quality. And I think this was kind of the Achilles heel for SmackDown, at least until you get into early 2004 and Eddie Guerrero kind of rises up. It's like nothing on these shows feel pay-per-view worthy. It just feels like an extended edition of SmackDown. This match is the perfect example of it. It's not the best match you'll ever see. It's a really good match. I think it's the best match on the card. It's definitely in contention for it. But at the same time, are you missing anything if you don't go back and watch it? No, not really. Both guys had much better matches in their careers. They had much better matches against each other. So, but it is nice to kind of go back and see John Cena as he was kind of building up for his big run, because this is pretty much the start of what would become the big run for him. Because after this, he's building up, eventually taking the U.S. title off the Big Show, which we're about to get to, at WrestleMania 20. He was one of the most popular guys in MSG, and that's just 6 months after this show. So bigger things were in store for John Cena. So it's kind of cool to go back and see him in the early years when he was just starting to cut his teeth. And Kurt Angle is tremendous in this era. So it's a fun match, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple cool spots in this match. Angle out wrestled Cena at the beginning.
The hell you say?
I mean, Cena even hits a apron DDT on Angle at one point.
Yeah, you could tell that he had the seeds to be great in him. And Kurt Angle, of course, would, sacrifice life and limb during this stretch to get the match over. It's like, if you needed, Kurt Angle was like the cross between Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect at this time. He would sell his butt off for you. He would do whatever he had to do to get a match over. The dude was just a wrestling savant. He was just operating on another level. 2003 was probably his finest year when you count the Rumble match, the matches with Lesnar that he had, and here, once again, carrying John Cena to probably Cena's best match in 2003 to that point, I would say. It just depends on if you really enjoy John Cena's other work. In 03 is probably his best match on pay-per-view. So, Kurt Angle's just operating on a different level from everyone else at this point.
Yeah, so finishing the match comes when Angle locks in the Angle lock, and Cena ends up tapping out. So Kurt Angle wins.
Yep. And let that be a little trivia note. John Cena has submitted before. So
he has given up.
That would not last long. I don't think John Cena has surrendered any time in the last decade. So
yeah, I don't think he has. I think this might have been maybe the last time he's One of the few times that he's actually tapped out in the match.
It's a very distinct possibility because after this, he did kind of get going on his babyface run. Uh, Actually, if I'm not mistaken, didn't he begin his babyface run before Survivor Series?
Yeah, I think at Survivor Series is where he officially turns face.
Yeah, because Paul Heyman comes in after this, and it's against Heyman. Heyman kind of serves as the catalyst for him turning face. Because there's the famous segment on SmackDown with Benoit and Heyman and Cena, and Benoit is torturing Heyman with a sharpshooter, and Cena's like a bar of soap or something, I think.
Yeah, it was a few months after this, I believe, or shortly before the Royal Rumble, I believe, is where that happened.
Right, I think you're right. I think it is kind of before the Rumble. So, but yeah, Cena is about to make the babyface turn that launches him into the stratosphere. So this is one of his last big matches. Is kind of the heel character, I guess you would say.
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting actually. Now that I think about that, because yeah, he is really on the precipice of the babyface turn that he never loses. He never goes heel again, except for when he's wrestling ECW One Night Stand. So,
yeah. So overall, pretty good match for what it was.
Yeah, it's not going to set your world on fire, but it's definitely a match worth seeing on this card.
So next up, Eddie Guerrero versus The Big Show for the United States Championship.
I would like to think that hindsight being 2020, if Vince knew what he was about to have with Eddie Guerrero, he wouldn't have booked the match like this. Big Show was not very good at this point in time. And Big Show's U.S. title run coming out of this match is not exactly stellar stuff.
It's a god-awful run. It is a god-awful run.
The running joke was that Big Show used to eat the title so he didn't have to defend it. Levels of inactivity as U.S. champion.
Yeah.
Thankfully, better things were ahead for Eddie Guerrero. But this match is, like 10 minutes of everything wrong with the WWE at this point. Big Show defeating Eddie Guerrero is just, it's not good. No bueno, not good. So.
Yeah, I mean, this feud, the way it started was so weird because Big Show comes out for commentary for Charlie Haas and Eddie Guerrero for the title. And Big Show just attacks Eddie Guerrero really for no reason. But it does get a lot better after this because the next week, Eddie Guerrero gets Big Show some burritos with some very special sauce.
Oh, God.
That forces him to leave mid-match against Orlando Jordan. And he ends up getting diarrhea, and Eddie Guerrero just kicks the stall door right into him while he's on the toilet.
Yeah, I remember the burrito segment, and
it gets even better after this.
Oh no!
Because the next week on SmackDown, Eddie Guerrero drives out a sewage truck and sprays Big Show with crap, which I think half of it was his from the previous week.
Better is a subjective term. That's all we'll say.
And then on the go home show for this, Big Show ends up destroying Eddie Guerrero's lowrider and ends up chokeslamming him on the top of the car.
What a bastard. That lowrider did nothing to deserve to die. So.
But yeah, Eddie Guerrero does all he can to try and retain. He tries to he does try to hit him with a trash can lid, brass knuckles, all that kind of stuff. Eddie Guerrero, does a frog splash for a near fall. Big Show ends up hitting a choke slam for the win, 2 choke slams for the win. Becomes the new United States champion. Yeah, that's not very good. But in hindsight, it doesn't really surprise me because Eddie Guerrero was a double champion at this time. Because Chavo Guerrero ends up coming back after a big injury, and they end up reforming Los Guerreros. And so Eddie Guerrero goes back into the tag division at this time. And Eddie and Los Guerreros is in a really weird place at this point in time. It's not that crowds don't like Los Guerreros anymore, but it's at this point in time where like Chavo's coming back, but by the time Chavo came back, Eddie had done so many different things, and he had become like a upper mid card at this point. And I think people were sort of more invested in a solo Eddie run rather than Los Guerreros doing their thing again.
They were ready for Eddie to take the next step up, and going back into the tag team almost felt like a step back, I think, because I think, and you watched SummerSlam 2003 not too awful long ago, and you know that I think by August of 2003, it was pretty clear that Eddie had a groundswell of organic support behind him, and the crowd kind of wanted to push him up the card. And thankfully, by 2004, that happens, and we get a chance to see Eddie in the main event. And so it's kind of one of those deals where it works out okay for Eddie in the next 6 months. He gets to defend the WWE Championship at WrestleMania at Madison Square Garden. That is no small thing. That's a huge deal for Eddie, and he gets to have the big title run with JBL over the summer. And so, this title loss, this match was frustrating as a fan of Eddie at the time. It was annoying. Big Show, of course, would have just, a complete non-factor title reign. He didn't really do anything until he lost the title to Cena. So, I mean, you see in hindsight what they were setting up. They obviously wanted to put the title on Cena and to get him where they wanted him to go. Eddie had better stuff ahead of him, so you can kind of forgive it now. But this match is really not that special. It's just kind of a lame match with a lame finish that kind of depresses the crowd, really.
Yeah, it's one of the weaker matches on the card.
Yeah, Big Show was not nearly as good in 2003 as he would become. Big Show had a lot better matches to come, especially in 2008 and 9 when he was, doing his tag team runs with guys like Chris Jericho and The Miz. He definitely had a much better run in him later on. So this is not peak Big Show, to say the least. This is actually one of his worst periods in the ring.
And,
so Eddie did what he could, but you're just not getting a good match out of Big Show in 2003.
Yeah. So coming up next, it's time for the main event. It's the Undertaker versus Brock Lesnar for the WWE Championship and a Vince Russo special biker chain on a pole match.
I gotta be honest with you. I was just ready for this pay-per-view to be over at this point. Enough. It's so weird when you consider the feud that Brock and Undertaker had the year before this in 2002. And then you consider the feud they had after when Brock came back. You look at the historical nature of Brock and The Undertaker between 2002 and then 2014, 2015. Honestly, this match, I had forgotten all about it. I did not remember this match until I watched the show back. And honestly, this match didn't do anything for me. I thought the matches in 2002 were better than this one. Undertaker, as Biker Taker, was wearing a little thin for a lot of people at this point. And I think that's as big a reason they wound up making the change in 2004 to send him back as the Dead Man. Biker Taker just wasn't that interesting a character anymore. And, I think it kind of shows in this main event. It just really wasn't all that stimulating of a match. It was just kind of there, like most of the rest of the card, I thought.
Mm, I actually really like this match for the most part. Really, the only problem I have with this match is that one, there's not really much of a story going into here because Brock Lesnar interferes in Taker's match with Kurt Angle for the title few weeks beforehand. And that's really all it is for the storyline. That's really all it is. So there's not much of a storyline going into this. And two, it does feel like the match is structured a bit weird.
Yeah, outside of the Angle match, this felt like the longest match on the show by far.
It was the longest match on the show. It was like 24 minutes, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, and the weird thing about the show, and one of the reasons that the show just kind of has such a blah feel to it, a lot of the matches on this show were under 10 minutes. Like they were the tag match, uh, the I Quit match with McMahon, Vince, and Stephanie, that was under 10 minutes. And you had Big Show and Eddie, they went about 11. And then Benoit and A-Train went about 11, 12. And then the opener was 10 or 11. So it's like you're having all these 10-minute matches and you're going one right after the other, and nothing's really standing out, but it's just kind of flowing. And then you get this match at 24 minutes in a period where The Undertaker and Brock, they're kind of not wrestling at the most expedient of paces. It's just one of those deals where if you like the guys involved, you'll probably enjoy the match. I didn't care for Brock's 2003 run, to be honest. And I never liked Biker Taker, so I'm probably biased against the match to begin with. It just felt too long for me. It was just too long of a match, I thought, for what they did.
I do think they could have shortened it down a few minutes, but I didn't really mind it all that much. I mean, I was invested in the match, even though I didn't know the outcome of the match. I was still invested in it. But I am a big Undertaker fan, so I'm always going to watch anything that he's in.
That might be what it is for me, because I am a much bigger fan of the Deadman character than Biker Taker. And knowing the kind of matches that Undertaker would go on to have in the years to come, even though his schedule would be, kind of cut back a little bit when he went back to the Deadman character, some of the matches he would have against guys like Edge and Batista moving forward, I think I'm a victim really of his future success. I know what he's going to do in the years to come, and so I see this match, and I don't think this match is on the same level as some of his later matches, and I think that might be playing into this. Like you said, it's not a bad match. It's decent for what it is, but the fact that he would have better matches to come and the character wasn't there for me, I think that's why I didn't much care for it. And then they could have chopped a little bit of time off and shortened it up a bit. But, there just wasn't much of a story. This was just kind of a match just to kind of get through this pay-per-view. And then Undertaker would kind of shift gears with Vince after this and do the whole deal that set up his return as the Dead Man. So it is what it is. It's just there. If you're a completionist and want to see all the Undertaker Brock Lesnar matches, you can go back and check this out. Otherwise, they had better matches, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, there are some cool trivia notes here. I mean, this is the second No Mercy in a row where Brock and Taker main evented.
That's right, because in 2002, the No Mercy show was headlined by the Hell in a Cell match. I had forgotten that. That is true.
Yeah, and so this match has a lot of interference in it. The first time Taker tries to go for the chain, the lights end up going out.
Hey. Yep.
And the full-blooded Italians interfere for really no reason. Like, there is no reason why they should be in this match. Like, they have history with Taker, but the last time they feuded was in June. It's October now. There's no reason why they should be interfering in this match. And then finally, once Taker finally gets the chain off, Vince McMahon interferes and crotches him on the rope. Brock Lesnar gets the chain, bashes Taker with it, wins the match, retains the title. And that ends up going to lead into Undertaker and Vince in the Buried Alive match of Survivor Series.
Yeah, anytime the full-blooded Italians are in your main event feud, I think you have a problem. I think it says a little something about your match, but yeah, like it set up the deal with Vince and the Buried Alive match, and I think, you know, considering where they would wind up going with the Undertaker after this was probably almost just kind of the catalyst to get him into that program with Vince. I think it was never meant to be any great shakes as a story on itself. If you wanted the story with Brock and the Undertaker, you need to go back to 2002 because they had a much better story attached to that feud than you had in 2003. 2003, this is almost just a placeholder championship match in order to start getting the pieces aligned.
Right.
Which that might also play into my general disinterest in the match. It doesn't really lead anywhere with Brock and Undertaker. It's just kind of setting up the Undertaker to work with Vince, and Brock, you know, he just kind of exists going into Survivor Series when they had the big team match, and you know it would get better, but this was just kind of there for me. So.
I mean, are you saying that you were not invested in his match with Hardcore Holly at the Royal Rumble for the title?
I am fairly comfortable saying I was not very invested in a Hardcore Holly match. Yeah. Not in 2004. Maybe a hardcore match in 99 would be different, but when you look at what Brock had to put up with, it's not a great surprise that he wound up leaving. That's all I'll say. It's like, if I had to put up with some of the stuff he did, I would have probably booked it for the NFL too. So, but that's
so overall, I mean, I think I liked this match more than you did. I did enjoy the match for the most part. Not a perfect match. I think the match was sort of structured a bit weird. I feel like they could have had a bit more of a back and forth in terms of trying to get the chain and stuff. Like the fact that there were no rules in this match wasn't really enforced until halfway through, so it did feel I got a bit of a slow start. But I think once it did find its groove, I really enjoyed the match. I enjoyed the power driver on the steel steps. I thought that was a really cool spot. But I mean, overall, I thought it was an enjoyable match for what it was. I think it had. I think it was better than it had any right to be, considering the story going into it. So I did like this match.
I think it was better than their match at, I'm wanting to say Unforgiven was the show before No Mercy in 2002.
Yeah.
They had the match at Unforgiven that ended in a no contest, which led to Hell in a Cell at No Mercy 2002. That match, I think, is their best match.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And that's probably playing into this a little bit. You know, the 2003 match, you know, here, I think it's better than their first match at Unforgiven, but the Hell in a Cell match, I think, had more ferocity to it. It was a more brutal match, and I think it was a better match, a better kind of street fight feel in the Hell in a Cell environment. But yeah, this match, you know, I don't mean to imply this match was terrible, because it wasn't. It wasn't terrible.
Right.
It was decent for what it was, but I think that it wasn't it wasn't the best representation of the feud they had built up from the year before. So, like I said, if you're just a completionist and you don't want to see all their matches, then you're not going to have a bad time going back and finding this match. But I don't think that you get anything in this match that you can't get other places in a better fashion. It's kind of, I think, my big thought coming out of it. So
yeah. So overall, that does it for No Mercy 2003. What'd you think of this show as a whole, Biff?
It wasn't the worst show of the year. I think Bad Blood might take the cake on the worst show of 2003. it wasn't the best show either. It was this weird intermediary period where they're starting to set up new things for SmackDown, and it's not all there yet. The show honestly didn't really feel like much of a pay-per-view. It felt kind of like an extended episode of SmackDown. The match quality was okay. It wasn't anything special. The storylines, for the most part, were eh. And, especially, as you get into Survivor Series, you have, the face run for John Cena getting started good. Chris Benoit is about to make his run. Eddie Guerrero is going to make his run in the next couple of months. And so you have better things on the horizon for the company. The product gets a lot better as you get into 2004. So this show, I think, especially given its placement in the year, it feels just kind of like a placeholder show. They're just trying to get new pieces into place so they can start new stories. And so I think it kind of gives this show kind of a mediocre aura. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It was just there. I think that really sums it up for me.
Yeah, I think that sums it up for me as well. It's like I didn't hate this pay-per-view. I think there were shows earlier on in the year that were way worse. Like I would much rather watch this show over something like Judgment Day or something like that. I mean, I actually did like Bad Blood for what it was. It wasn't a great show, but it was perfect. But it wasn't a great show, but it was fine for what it was. I think I would much rather watch that over this one, if only for the Hell in the Cell match. But yeah, overall, it was fine. It was okay. It wasn't the greatest show in the world, but it wasn't completely terrible either. It was just kind of a nothing show. It was what it was.
Yeah, the whole period from, I would say, WrestleMania 19 to the 2004 Royal Rumble, it felt kind of like, I don't know. I guess the departure of Brock, but the fact that Brock leaves in 04, it kind of renders a lot of what happens in 03 not meaningless. I don't want to say meaningless, but it almost feels like a waste, almost, because you have so much emphasis on Brock being built up over 2003, and then he loses the title to Eddie Guerrero, and he's gone within 2 months. It's like all of that setup, it just kind of get wiped out, and now you have a new crop of top guys that are about to come in the form of Orton, Cena, Batista, Guerrero, Benoit. It's just like there's 2003 is like a very distinct year from 2004 and 2005. And I think 2004 in particular is a much better year overall than 2003. Now, WrestleMania 19 was great. One of the best WrestleManias ever, in my opinion. And there's some other shows in 2003 that are pretty decent. And you have some really legendary matches in 03 as well. The Benoit Angle match from the 03 Royal Rumble. Perfect example. You find gems like that throughout the year. You just got to know where to look. So, in the grand scheme of things, No Mercy is by no means the worst show of the year. It's what you might consider like a good popcorn show. It's not going to light your world on fire, but it's not going to bore you to tears either. If you're just looking for a show that you've never seen before, you could do far worse. You could do better, but you could do far worse too. So, I have neither a recommendation to watch it nor a recommendation to avoid it. If you want to go back and see it, it's there. It's a decent way to spend a couple hours. So.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a step down from the previous couple of pay-per-views, but overall, it was a decent enough show.
Yeah, it is what it is. It's just kind of there. I mean, there's not much more you can say about it, honestly. It's a show that exists. It's a show that happened. And that's really all that you can say about it at the end of the day. There were better shows before it, and there would be better shows after it. So,
Yeah. So I think that just about does it for No Mercy 2003 for this episode. Where can I find you at, Biff?
you can find me on the Twitter at Real Deal Biff. That's DILL like the pickle. Tomorrow morning, Shooting Debris, I'll be a special guest. I go a month without podcasting, and now I've got 3 podcasts in 3 days. I'll be a guest on the Shooting Debris podcast tomorrow, so be there, be hexagonal, and I'll also be making my return to the Connoisseurs of Wrestling podcast Sunday evenings, 9 p.m. on YouTube. And you can find me over at Cage Side Seats when I'm awake and alert. So that's where you can find Biff.
Yep, and you can find me on Twitter at MetalMatt15. I'm also on Cage Side Seats, hang out in the daily and nightly as well as NXT threads and the SmackDown threads. On the nightly, we're currently doing a Kiss retrospective every nightly. Tonight is going to be on Dynasty, which is sort of the beginning of the end for Kiss's mainstream success for a bit.
I like that album though, so
honestly,
I'm looking forward to that.
Without giving too much away, I will say I do like that album as well.
I gotta ask you one thing before we wrap up, though. What's your thought? I have to ask you this because I know you're a fan. What are your thoughts on the Becky Lynch storyline so far? How do you feel this turn? She's kind of become like the anti-hero character. What are you thinking so far?
Oh man, you're about to make me go on a rant.
I
will say this. I mean, I will say this. I'm not a huge fan of them doing it. If they're going to do it as an anti-hero, sure, why not? I mean, the problem I had was them trying to push her as a heel, which is clearly what they were trying to do, but fan reactions, they just could not be able to do it. The fact that they even tried to do it in the first place is just kind of weird. As long as she gets it, yeah, they failed miserably. Hopefully she'll win the title. I can't really say I'm expecting it to happen because of Becky's track record. Like for a long time, like whenever she came out for a match, I was immediately expecting her to lose, which it sounds depressing, but for a while it was depressing. But at this point in time, it is the most talked about feud. So hopefully, I don't think they'll disappoint. So hopefully, it'll all work out.
I will say this: we've talked at length over at Cage Side about this, and you know that I was a proponent early on this summer for Becky to turn heel because I thought it would give her a chance to be a top player. I didn't think that she had a real good shot at it being the face because of what they were going to try to do with Charlotte. And then it turned out to be true in a sense because they didn't want Charlotte to go heel, but the way they did it, it kind of stymied any chance of Becky being the heel. Hindsight being 2020, I am very thankful that they wound up going the route they did, if for no other reason that Becky Lynch has never been more popular. I think if you're just looking at it from the terms of the performer, you may not like the gimmick necessarily. And that's perfectly fine. It's a subjective thing, from fan to fan. If you liked Becky Lynch better before she turned on Charlotte, that's perfectly fine. But I think, we can take solace in the fact that Becky Lynch has never been this hot before in terms of crowd reaction. I mean, she is literally one of the most popular people on the roster right now. She's getting huge reactions everywhere she goes. And so, say what you will about the characterization and where they're going to go in the future. I'm very happy that Becky is getting so much success right now. She deserves it. It's great from just looking at the performer, say nothing about the character. I'm just so happy that she's really getting her time to shine. And she is killing it on the microphone. She is hot, straight fire. on the microphone, and anti-hero women are 50% hotter than pure babyface women too. So I'm thrilled beyond measure. So.
Yeah, I mean, she does have a lot of momentum now, but you just watch WWE try and spin it like, oh, it was the plan all along. No, it wasn't.
No, no, it wasn't. And there's a better than 50% chance they'll screw it up in the end because, we can't have nice things. But, for the moment, Becky Lynch is the hottest act in the company. And so if you're a Becky Lynch fan, I think that, this is the best you could hope for right now. She's on top of the world, and I'm glad that she's getting her chance to shine. So. But hopefully it keeps up,
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
But yeah, so next week, going to be doing some plugs here, Shooting the Breeze every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central. Connoisseurs of Wrestling every Monday night. It does have a new time. I'm trying to think it was 7 or 8 Central.
Ooh, yeah, I've been off so long. I've been out of the loop. I can't tell you for sure. I know that's terrible. I should know these things, but I suck. So
yeah, they have moved to Mondays now. I'm trying to remember if it's 7 Central or 8 Central. I want to say it's 8 Central, but I could be wrong.
I think it is 8 Central. That would kind of line up with Taker's schedule. So I would venture a guess to say it is 8 Central, 9 Eastern. So
yeah. So we also have Fizzy's Wacky World of Wrestling, as well as Two Guys One Sport every Thursday night at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. And we also have Violent Wrestling Podcast every Wednesday night. And also a brand new episode of Ruthless Aggression Era Podcast next Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. And next week's episode, we're going to be having the One Winged Angel back on. And we will be talking about the Stone Cold Truth, as well as SmackDown Here Comes the Pain.
Angel, you lucky bastard.
You won't be saying that in a few weeks. When me, Angel, and Mox take a look at WWE Originals.
Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. Yeah, there'll be some prayers going up for that one. I don't know who I'm praying for the most on that little shindig, but that should be a fun listen. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, totally. So next week, next Friday, One Winged Angel and I are going to be talking about the Stone Cold Truth, Stone Cold's book, as well as SmackDown Here Comes the Pain. So that should be a pretty fun episode.
Looking forward to it.
So I think that just about does it for this episode. Anything else to add, Biff, before we get out of here?
Yeah, I always make it a point to let Adam Rice know that his sports teams suck. I love you, Adam. I gotta knock on you a little bit, buddy. So. But I appreciate you having me on. It's good to be back into the rotation and getting back into the swing of things. It's been a rough couple of weeks being in the hospital, so I'm really glad that I was able to come on and hang out with you. It was fun to reminisce about old times in wrestling, so I appreciate it. I really do, bud.
Yeah, so thanks for being on, man.
No worries.
So that just about does it for the Ruthless Aggression Era podcast this week. Next week, One Winged Angel joins me for SmackDown Here Comes the Pain and the Stone Cold Truth. But until then, that's going to be all. And we will see you all next time. See ya.
Take care, guys.